Hey, I wasn't going to film this, but then it occurred to me that this is a recipe that is super easy, that is super popular with my family, and that other people might be interested in doing it. Easy, good, fast. That's kind of the trifecta for me. So I was going to show you my shortcut for doing chicken. When I have a recipe that requires cooked chicken that I'm going to shred, I like using chicken breasts because it's not as fatty a meat. A lot of times I will mix boneless, skinless chicken breasts with boneless, skinless chicken thighs because then it's sort of a good mix with the white meat and the dark meat. So today I just ended up going and I didn't find any chicken thighs. I found chicken breasts, so that's what I got. When I do it like this, I do it in a huge batch all at once because you can also freeze the chicken after you shred it. It doesn't keep for a really long time because it gets little ice crystals in it if you try to keep it for a long time in the freezer. But for short periods of time, it's really easy and really fast and really good. All I have done is taken chicken breasts and I have done, let's see here, I'm going to end up doing 8 pretty good sized chicken breasts. I'm just going to dump these in, show you what I'm doing here. So it's a pretty full crock pot, and it's a large crock pot, so it can hold a lot. I'm going to add, this is great if, like when you go to work, if you put this in before you leave and let it cook on low until you get back home, it also works. But I'm going to cook it on high and it'll only take about 4 hours. I like using bone broth. My favorite is the Wegmans bone broth, but I didn't go all the way into Wegmans. Laura, it is my rendition of your mom's. I like her crust, but the kids prefer the pastry crust. I know, they're crazy. This is just sort of how I've adapted your mom's to be able to do it quickly when I need to. And we love it. We also love her, but you knew that. Wegmans bone broth is my favorite. But this time I didn't get to go to Wegmans, so I just got the Imagine brand. But it's got a pretty high protein content, and I like the flavor, and it doesn't have a ton of sodium in it. It's only got about 300 milligrams of sodium. All right, I'm putting about 4 cups of this chicken broth in here, this bone broth in here, and it's going to pretty much almost cover the chicken breasts. Not quite, but sticking up a little bit. I have added a little bit less than 4 cups for this much chicken, and it's worked out just fine. I am going to add a couple of bay leaves for this huge pot full, if I can get any bay leaves out that are intact. This is not really that precise. It's just a good way to flavor a cut of meat that doesn't have a ton of flavor. Chicken breast is really good for you, but you can get awfully tired of eating it because it doesn't have a ton of flavor. So I'm adding the bone broth, which adds more flavor. I've added bay leaves, a couple of bay leaves for this much. I'm going to add a good teaspoon of black pepper. So I'm just measuring it in the palm of my hand. It's a half to a whole teaspoon, probably more like a whole teaspoon of black pepper because I like it and I think it amps up the flavor. And if you have seen Better Than Bouillon, it's in the soups, bouillon, stock section of the grocery store. I put just a teeny bit of this in, even though I've already added this good bone broth in. I get the low sodium bone broth usually, but I add a teeny bit of this in, which does up the sodium content, which is not great, but it also ups the flavor. And I'm, again, not precise, and I don't dissolve it in anything first. I just take a teaspoon and I get sort of the end of the teaspoon on and just put it in here as well. It will cook in as it goes, and all I can tell you is it just seems to amp up the flavor a little bit. And anything we can do to these chicken breasts to make them more flavorful is better. I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to set it on a high setting since I'm just going to cook it for this afternoon. If I were setting it for like an all day while I was out, I would put it on low. But I'm just going to set it, turn my power on, put it on high cook, and I'm gonna set it for about 4 hours. 4 hours should be plenty. I'm gonna come back and look at it. What I want is for the chicken breasts to, of course, all be cooked, but to be to the point where they're falling apart, and so they've had a lot of chance to absorb the liquid from the chicken broth. This recipe is adapted from a dear friend's mother who made this recipe on Sundays. I would go over to her house on Sundays to have this, and it is a simple recipe, but simple's good sometimes. She did this fantastic flour and butter and milk topping that made like a soft crust on the top. My family is sort of more traditional about their chicken pie, and they like having a pastry crust. So I, do what every good Southern mom does and buy a box of the Pillsbury already made pie crust, and I just roll out the pie crust on top of it. But my chicken pie, this chicken pie, does not have vegetables in it. It is just the chicken and the broth, and it's got cream of chicken soup in it, and salt and pepper together, all mixed together with the crust, one crust, not two. And I usually serve it with a side of whatever vegetables we've got in the freezer or look good. Corn, green beans, green peas, broccoli. I literally name a vegetable, I've probably served it with it. But the great thing about this recipe is it freezes fantastically. And I usually just get the 8x8 aluminum pans and do them in the aluminum pan and wrap it up in the Glad press and seal wrap, and then put aluminum foil on top of that, and I slide them into a large Ziploc freezer bag and then freeze them flat, and then you can stack them on top of each other once they've been frozen solid. But when you get them out, you don't have to defrost them. You can bake them from frozen. I also get the little tiny, sort of like the banquet chicken pot pies. Now they have the little tiny aluminum pans that look like pot pie pans. Well, you can make those. One recipe is about 3 chicken breasts, and it's 3 chicken breasts, a cup of chicken broth, it's 3 chicken breasts, a can of cream of chicken soup, a can of the same size can of chicken broth, and mixing that together, and it's got salt, pepper in it with the crust on top. Well, doing the little banquet size chicken pot pie things, you can get 2 or 3 of those out of one recipe for one chicken pot pie. I'm going to do 4 today. I'm going to make 2 for us because it takes 2 of these to feed my family, and then I'm going to make a couple to take to somebody. So anyway, all of that felt long and protracted for no reason, but these are going to be falling apart in about 4 hours, and I'll show you how I mix up the rest and put it together. It's super easy. I actually do a little trick with some tiny little cookie cutters that I have that just helps me use more of the dough, because you cut off dough around the edges and then you have this little ball of dough left, and I try to use as much of it as possible. But I usually put some sort of shape on top of the chicken pie because the kids like it. Stars, hearts, something else. Anyway, it's going to cook up for a while. When I get to the point where I'm going to put it all together, I will do another short video to show you how to put it together, because it will just take a short video. It's not much at all. And a shout out to Miss Patsy for this fantastic recipe. We've been enjoying it literally. I've been enjoying it my whole life, and my kids have their whole lives, so we really appreciate it. Okay, that's it.